How are the kids? Good. It's live streaming now. My daughter has to go back for another week. She's running it in.
Checking the mic. Can everybody hear okay? It's clear?
Good evening. To vote is to be invited into an intentional relationship and a partnership with your community, your state, your nation, and how it is governed, with integrity, compassion, righteousness, and justice. To be welcomed into the voting process is an act of hospitality, first and foremost. And when hospitality is compromised, things happen. And something has happened in the state of North Carolina. And it is not the first time. The poll tax, which was established immediately after rights to disenfranchised people was awarded, was taken out of the Constitution of North Carolina in 1971, a mere 52 years ago. And if you're into the fact that 50 is the new 30, that's yesterday. So this evening is devoted to naming the impact of this decision and to identify the solutions to the barriers that will affect our neighbors feeling welcomed on Election Day, without bias or prejudice or fear. The Reimagining America Project's mission is to shed light on the impact of systemic and persistent racism on the institutions that affect the quality of life: health, education, criminal justice, environment, housing, and tonight, the act of voting. We have 4 people who are going to speak to the solutions. Samantha is going to ask the questions. And I'm going to ask you, before you get into how it will work, I would ask that each of you please speak to the impact of the decision that has been made on the quality of life within your agency and in your workplace. And then get into how it rolls out. The work is not just on, the burden of this is not just on these 4 people. They're the stewards tonight. It's on all of us. We all have a responsibility to ensure hospitality to everyone who wishes to vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming out here. Thank you to everybody who's online watching on our YouTube channel. Mayor Jennifer Roberts sends her deepest apologies. She wanted to be here so bad. She's not feeling well, so I'm here in her place. I will do my best. First, I'd like to introduce this incredible panel. We have Rotrina Campbell. Rotrina was the previous North Carolina redistricting organizer, and she's the current civic engagement coordinator for Common Cause North Carolina. Rotrina has been organizing in the nonprofit and political sector, working closely with our community and especially our local youth on voting advocacy for over a decade. Kate Bellman. Kate, in 2014, she founded and is the executive director of the crucial organization You Can Vote. Who knew? She has over 21 years of civic and community mobilizing experience. And wait till she tells you about this organization. And I mean, none of these people can top another because they're all awesome. Pamela Pearson. She is the National Voter ID Assistance Director, National, the North Carolina Voter ID Coalition Coordinator, and Deputy General Counsel for Vote Riders. She has been a prolific attorney, nonprofit leader, and passionate justice warrior in the Charlotte area for over 25 years. I believe she's a northerner like I am. And then, of course, we have Michael Dickerson, who's been the director of Mecklenburg County Board of Elections for the past 25 years. And before that, he was working as deputy staff director for the Federal Election Commission in Washington, D.C. So please just give them a round of applause. Thank you. Each of you has been working on voting, democracy, and civic engagement, but with a different organization, with a different emphasis and focus. So I'm going to go from left to right, and I'd like for each of you to give a short summary of the mission of your particular organization and how you work in the community. Rotrina, please start.
Hello, everybody. Thank y'all for being here tonight. Thank you, Samantha, for that introduction. So basically, Common Cause, we really focus on voting access, redistricting, gerrymandering is our thing. I originally was hired as the redistricting organizer when they started, of course, doing redistricting, which turned into gerrymandering. And making sure that folks are involved and engaged and know what's going on in the community. Definitely what we're going to talk about as far as voter ID and having access. That's a lot of the work that Common Cause that we do. We do have folks that lobby, and then also, like myself, organized throughout the state as well. And we work on HBCU campuses as well to do advocacy work. So a little bit everywhere. I'll pass.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me. I'm Kate Feldman. I founded You Can Vote. Does anybody remember the summer of 2013 when the Shelby versus Holder Supreme Court decision came down, cutting the Voting Rights Act that protected 40 North Carolina counties? Well, I did. I had been working in North Carolina elections since early January 2008. And I knew the impact that it was going to have without the protections, federal protections of the Voting Rights Act. I just knew all the voters that I had helped get to the polls who didn't know how to vote or didn't know where to go, didn't know what to do. This is just the added layer of barriers, real or perceived, because really in that law, it was a lot of barriers. It was unconstitutional for targeting African Americans with surgical precision. But if you did the steps right, you can vote. So I started an organization that trains and mobilizes volunteers who want to help their neighbors vote and want to use things that work, like the Fridge Card, that accurate, up-to-date election rules in a simple format that meets voters where they are, not where we are, because I've voted in every single election and I know what my next election is and I know how to find resources, but most people don't pay attention every year, municipal years. And so we're out there with our volunteers and staff now, we have 24 staff members across the state, educating people like, hey, we have an upcoming election. Like, did you know that we're voting next week in Charlotte? Does anybody know that? Most people don't. So we meet people where they are, we educate them on what elections are coming up, what those offices do, not the candidates. Candidates come and go, offices, their powers and responsibilities need to be understood so people can start to take part in their democracy. And then we make sure they're registered at their current address. A registration at the current address is one of the key elements to making sure that voters' vote counts. Registration is the foundation. You have to be registered where you live. It makes it so much easier. So we're registering voters and we're educating them on the 3 ways to vote and how that differs. People don't know the difference between what it means to vote early or on election day or by mail or what's required. And then our Fridge Card, we've had many iterations of these over the past 10 years of changes, and it now again contains the photo ID language, but you'll notice it does not say that photo ID is required to vote, because you will be asked for a photo ID, but you can vote with or without an ID, and there are ways to do it and make your vote count. And so we're not scaring people with these new rules and scaring them away from participating. We're empowering them to be an advocate for themselves at the polling location, successfully vote, because once you start voting, you will continue. So that's, and to go to your point of how it's impacted our organization, the planet, the trees, we've had to recycle so many of these, and we have to do it on a dime because it is hard to keep up with constantly changing election laws. And take that information, give it to volunteers so that they can be effective and do no harm, and then down to the voters to make sure that they show up and they don't stay home because of a perceived barrier to voting. So we are where the rubber meets the road in terms of getting fact-based information out to voters and building trust in the voting system. And it has been a difficult ride, but it's necessary.
I love following Kate. Hi, I'm Pam Pearson. I'm with Vote Riders. We're a national 501c3 organization. Our mission is a really laser-focused mission, and it's to make sure that everyone who lives in a state where there's an ID request or requirement for voting has the ID they need. And because we know that we can't always trust legislatures to make a rule and then let the rule be the rule going forward, our focus is very, very singular. It's to make sure that everyone who lives in one of those states has a state ID or a driver's license. And the reason we do that is because that's the only forms of ID that we know will always be on an approved list. You look at the strictest state in the country right now, which is Ohio, there's 4 forms of ID that are allowed to be used for voting. State ID, driver's license, a veterans or military ID, and a passport. There's no exceptions. I mean, right now in North Carolina, as Kate said, we have lots of options. And they're going to be confusing for people, but there are ways that people can vote if they don't have ID. But we don't know what the next election cycle is going to bring. So for that reason, we're focusing in North Carolina and elsewhere on making sure anyone who wants to get a state ID or driver's license can do that. We work with people one-on-one. Some of them self-refer to us because they find us through our website or some other means. But the way we really leverage our work is through partner organizations in the communities across the states where we're doing this work. We focus in 9 states right now, and Ohio the most recently added one. And we have staff there and train volunteers. And the volunteers, like in most organizations, they're the backbone of our work. It requires a fair amount of training, but those volunteers then work with the folks who are referred to us, usually through partner organizations in the community. So that can fall into 2 different camps. So on the one hand, statewide, we work with organizations like You Can Vote. If you go to their voter ID page at the bottom, you'll see, and if you don't have an ID and would like help getting one, you can contact VoteWriters, our trusted partner. So it's the democracy organizations on the one hand, and then in our communities, it's organizations like the shelters in Charlotte, like churches, like Goodwill, organizations that are helping people who need services. And this is an additional service, the ID assistance, that makes a lot of sense. So think about it. Goodwill is helping screen people for their job skills, helping getting them some training, and then connect them with employers. If those folks don't have a state ID or driver's license and a social security card, they will not be able to get onboarded to those jobs. They'll be stuck working under the table, and that's not good. And it's not just not good for them, but it means they're going to be less likely to be voters. Because if you don't have a stable job, if you don't have stable housing, all of these things contribute to getting in the way of making voting a priority. So for that reason, our help with ID is sort of the double-barreled win, because it means that people are going to have what they need for voting if they're asked for it, and it also means they're going to have what they need for the rest of their lives. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you. First off, thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you very much for this wonderful auditorium that we can have this event, and I appreciate being asked. It was funny you said you love following. These 3 scare me to death every day. They're wonderful people, but if I don't do my job right, I'm going to hear from 1, 2, or 3 of them. Usually all at the same time. But you can't pick 3 nicer people to work with. Their mission is like our mission. My mission as Director of Elections for Mecklenburg County is not to stop people from voting, but to get people to vote. I spend staff time going out finding a voting location. I have staff right now, John, I think y'all about, I got chief judges in this audience. I have been training the 2,000 people that will be working for us this September relentlessly for the last 3 weeks and hope to have it all ready. Believe it or not, I'm chasing down 2 precincts to use in the September 12th primary, which I have, in less than a month. I got kicked out of a couple of precincts, so we're going to find that. Is it going to be a big election this September? All elections are big to me. So in that tone, yes, it is. But I'm going to get maybe 10% if I'm lucky. It's a Democratic primary, 4 districts, and a mayor and city council at large. for the Democrats. That's it. So I've just eliminated about a third. We're about, say, 25% of my voters. No Republicans will be able to vote in this primary. So I've got that going. And the big thing we like about it is going to allow us to ease into voter ID. This is not new. We did this 16, and then it got kicked out in 18. 16, we did it. All of us, how many drove here tonight? You have a photo ID for voting. It's not a voter ID that I'm offering you, it's a photo ID. You've got that same photo ID with your North Carolina driver's license. So keep that in mind. We have people driving up. It was great. Yesterday I had Joe Bruno from WSOC. Everybody knows him. He came in. Michael, I want to see how I can get a photo ID. Let's talk about it, Joe. And I think it's airing tonight, as a matter of fact. Set your DVDs, or does anybody do DVDs anymore? VHS. I'm sorry, showing my age. But he came in and said, "How is it?" It's pretty easy. As luck would have it, it wasn't planned. A young fellow and his child came in. He was pushing the stroller in. He said, "I'd like to get a photo ID for voting." I said, "Perfect." Filled out the form, made its amendments, its changes on his form. He got it, completed the form, stood over there, got the picture taken, and in less than 5 minutes he was out. And Joe Bruno went up and interviewed him, and he said the word I like to hear the best. It was easy to get a photo ID. Now currently I've got one photo ID printer at the office. Once I get another, I plan on taking it to the road. Why not? If you can't drive down to my office, that might be the reason why you need a photo ID. So if we can get you to maybe a library or something of that, once I get the next one, we want to have everybody ready by the time we get to next year. This year, like I said, it'll be a small election, even November, but I want to make sure that you know. And that's the goal. Everybody on our team, everybody that's working at those precincts that you'll see on September 12th. We open up early voting next Thursday at the Commercial Annex. We'll run that for a week and a half and then open up 8 or 9 additional sites. Everybody at those sites, their whole job is to get you to vote. And that's going to be the key. Make sure that you can vote. So if you can't make it with a photo ID, I've got a reasonable impediment form for the ID exception. You're going to complete that. And as long as you can complete it and sign it and mark one of the boxes, my board has to count it. So your vote will count. So thank you again for having me. I look forward to the discussion tonight.
Well, thank you. Now we'll get into the issues that are most relevant to this fall's election. We do have school board members running too, and that's really important in CMS. There are new rules for voting, and you will need to bring photo ID to the polls. Bertrina, can you tell us how we got here in terms of what legislative decisions or referendums, cases overturned led to this circumstance? Or have we really covered that already? Okay.
No, I have some. We might need all night. There's been a lot going on. Oh, they not fair. I'll try to be brief. We do know, redistricting will be happening. So initially it was our Harper v. Hall. I'm going to start from there. The 2021 maps, which was overturned, and that decision was overturned earlier this year, which had found previously that the maps were unconstitutional and extremely, partisan to a particular party. But that was overturned once the election came up, 2023. Also the CSI v. Moore, which initially 56,000 folks who initially had maybe had a felony, but they were not in prison or jail could vote. That was overturned roughly 250 days, Kate, like afterwards. Kate can explain more too. She has it too. And then, so we had that going on as well, y'all. That was overturned. We also had the Moore v. Harper case that went up to the Supreme Court, which that one, y'all, they struck that down. So I would say with that, they rejected that independent state legislature theory, and basically SCOTUS upheld that the ability for the state Supreme Court to rule against state legislation in matters of federal election law, that is what it is. Now we talk about what we have going on today. See, I have to have it all written down. Some of the fastest moving anti-voter bills of 2023 legislature session is the Senate Bill 747, the Senate Bill 749, and the House Bill 772. What I do want to say is that the Senate Bill 747 on Wednesday, which was yesterday, it passed. So right now it is headed to Governor Cooper's desk, which we do believe he may veto that, but there is a supermajority, in the state legislature. I do have information too that I can share. It's a toolkit that has all this information because we'll be here all night to discuss them. But basically these bills will allow extremists who want to control over our elections to violate our privacy and challenge legitimate ballots, allow less time for voters to return their mail ballots, which could lead to thousands of ballots being thrown out, so cutting that 3-day grace period. In 2020, you had over 20,000 people within that grace period with absentee ballots that could change a whole election. Ban resources used by almost all North Carolina counties to run safe and secure elections, and create gridlock in elections administration, giving power to state politicians and potentially all but ending early voting. Something else. Give election integrity extremists more access to polling places. So this is what all three of these bills can do. I'll end it there.
So, Kate, who will be most affected by these future possible decisions and from the decisions that are happening right now?
So, unfortunately, the eligibility change is a really hard one. We spent a lot of time last year helping people who were on felony probation parole, let them know that you do have the right to vote now. And the problem is that most of the general public, we've educated over 1 million voters face to face in this organization over 9 years, and this year it's been 41,000. So we're really on the pulse of what voters are saying. And there is still massive confusion around eligibility, when you can vote, whether you have spent any time in jail or custody. Most people that we register that are coming off of felony probation and parole have been off for 10 years, 20. They just didn't know that they would ever have that right again. And so flip-flopping on that decision so fast after it was just easy to say, if you're outside of jail, you can vote. That is a really hard one for our staff. Because it impacts, the work that we do in helping people. But the majority of folks are really confused about this anyway, so we just need to let people know, hey, do you know the current eligibility? If you're still on probation, if you're still on parole for a felony, you got to wait until you're done. So that's a big piece, and that's a big piece of the voters that are impacted. But also students, think about the young people in our lives and finding an appointment to go to the DMV, and think about where they're registering as their residential address and where they get mail, and if they have a driver's license or not, or if they know the last 4 of their social security number. Driver's license and last 4 of your social security are important numbers for the boards of elections to match you up and you becoming a fully registered voter, so that when you show up, you're on the rolls, and you can present your a picture, your student ID. All UNC system schools are approved as student IDs will work as ID. But there are a lot of barriers for young people. If you don't get mail where you live, or you don't have bills in your name, that same day registration can be much harder for folks who are not already registered before early voting starts. And then of course, not every student is a driver. There's all sorts of out-of-state students that are gonna come in to this state, and thankfully their campus ID is going to work as ID. I think the biggest thing is that the perception is reality when it comes to these laws. And just introducing this question, you said everyone needs to bring an ID to the vote. That's not true. You can vote with or without ID. We need to get people to the polls. If they have an acceptable ID, bring it. If not, go. The poll workers are being trained to help you navigate this exception form. The exception form is wonderful. Any reason, lack of transportation, school schedule, I applied for my ID, it hasn't arrived yet. It's great. There are reasons, there are a lot of reasons why people wouldn't have one of these approved IDs, even though most people have one. And any one of those reasons is valid, and they can vote. So I don't want to convolute the message around like a picture and photo of your face for voting, and because it is confusing. And you need, for new voters, for voters who are not sure how voting works, or are re-entering society, the worst thing you can do is make it seem hard or confusing. A lot of young people think when they never voted before, it's like a trip to the DMV, and who really wants to put themselves through that? You need all these documents, it's gonna be hard, they're gonna ask you for all these things, you might be embarrassed. You don't wanna be embarrassed. You wanna look like you know what you're doing, you don't wanna be singled out, none of these things. So the best thing we can do is be on a united message that you can vote with or without ID. If you have it, bring it. If not, go vote. Ask for the exception form, and making sure everybody's registered at their current address is just the biggest piece of this puzzle in ensuring voters understand their right to vote. And how do we do this? You have to talk to everyone. You have to talk to everyone. There's a soup of confusion. People think you need to have a driver's license to get registered to vote. You do not. I've had to pull, every single time we're out at a registration event, I have to pull people who are walking away and say, I don't have my North Carolina driver's license yet, I can't get registered. Yes, you can. There's not a requirement to have a driver's license to get registered and vote. So I would just ask everybody to be careful because the confusion that we spread can take root and make people stay away from the polls. So we got to think about it for different audiences. Our messaging for different audiences, our messaging for activists and people who want to help is very different than our messages for new voters or people. Most people don't like voting. I'm sorry to say, I love it. Most people are like, oh, it's really a habit. It's like taking out the trash, making your bed. Nobody loves to do these things, but you do it because you get in the habit of doing it successfully, and it's not that hard. So that's kind of the overall message I want folks to kind of sit with tonight.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to Michael now. I'm going a little off script because we've covered a lot in these two questions already. So, Michael, how are the poll workers responding to this new responsibility, and what really are they going to be looking at when people come to their desks?
Actually, like I said, I've got a couple of judges out in the audience here. They could tell us how it all worked. So it's always great to see the folks that actually do the job. So far, it's been good. We're just like everybody's saying here, we're working to get you through it. We want to make sure that you can vote. And I apologize. Earlier, I said we vote in a couple weeks. I started voting last Friday. I forgot. We mailed out. I didn't forget. But my staff actually mailed out absentee ballots. And when you vote an absentee ballot this year, you are also sending me a copy of your photo ID so that I can see you voted it. I don't know. But we are administrators of the process at our office, and this is what we're telling our chief judges and judges and all our site coordinators. We're administering a process. We're not doing something because we want to do it. This is what we have chosen to do. We've chosen to work for a Board of Elections office, and that office is now followed by the rules of the North Carolina General Assembly that says, here's how you're going to do it. And if they give us this, what our job is how can I make certain that I let people vote? How can I make certain that my people at the precincts won't mess it up so that people can't vote. Because then I hear from everybody up here. I mean, they've all got my cell phone number. I don't know how that happened, but they've all got that, and even my personal. So they're all going to call me. I don't want that to happen. I don't want anybody. I mean, you mentioned, gosh, I don't want to feel stupid. No, we're so proud of you for coming in and voting. The whole process, that's why I love early voting. Early voting is so much easier for anybody to do. It is just so much easier. When we started early voting in 2000, I'm sorry, go a little off script, but I'll jump right back onto it. We had 58,000 people vote early. The last presidential election, 2020, 365,000 people voted early in this county alone. 88% of the folks that vote in this county vote before election day. 88%, that's huge. And that makes it so much easier for the life of my poll workers, so much easier for us to train, and so much easier for us to say, hey, we did a good job. And people walk away happy. So yes, what we're doing right now, and our poll workers, they're receptive to it. Are any of them going to say, well, you need a driver's license, and somebody giving you, oh, well, there's my Mecklenburg County ID. Is that going to happen? Yes. Yeah, it's going to happen. But it wasn't out of design. I just know from 2016 that happens, that somebody took the wrong ID. But it wasn't like there was fraud, so please don't tell me there's a lot of voter fraud in Mecklenburg County or in North Carolina. So, thanks. I hope I didn't mess up.
No, that's great. That's great. There is not a lot of fraud in Mecklenburg County or North Carolina or the United States for that matter. So we're talking about how these new future laws can affect, and that's one of the ways. If we get rid of early voting dates, we're going to lose a lot of voters that vote that way, especially in the rural counties. Pam, I wanted to ask you how you go about getting ID for people in the rural counties that surround us. We're in the southern Piedmont area, like Cabarrus and.
So the rural counties are definitely, I mean, the urban, suburban areas, those are easier areas for us to work with. It's much easier to find partner organizations in the community who are connecting with the groups of people who are less likely to already have a state ID or driver's license. And you're going to always hear me saying that because that's what we work to help people get. Now, when we get close to election day, if we know that we won't have enough time to help people get their birth certificate and social security cards so they can go get a state ID, we're absolutely going to either tell them, go in and vote and use the exception form, or go to Michael's office. You can go to his personal office, and he will print you a voter ID. And those voter IDs are actually a great thing for people who, for whatever reason, don't see a need or have access to go and get a state ID. They don't connect with us somehow. Getting that free voter ID, which is good for 10 years, is a great thing. So that's a part of it. The rural areas are really tough. So we partner with organizations that are reaching out into those communities. There are two big organizations in North Carolina that have that kind of focus. The New Rural Project focuses in 6 or 7 southeastern counties, and then Down Home NC focuses on another. I've lost track of how many counties because they've told me their current numbers and their expansion numbers, and I can't keep straight which are which. So it's a lot. So, and those, it's not possible realistically for us with a staff nationwide of less than 25 people to actually get out there and do that ourselves. But when we connect with organizations like those, we did a joint text bank with the New Rural Project the other night and texted 65,000 people in those counties, and we gave them the very clear message that Kate was talking about. You're going to be asked for ID when you go to vote. If you don't have that, you know, there's other ways. Do you need help? Do you have any questions? Do you need help? And that's how we try to reach the people, is to make sure that we're teeing up the issue for them, but offering them help in the same sentence so they understand this isn't just the door is shutting for you. the door is opening for you with information and the partnership with those other organizations. But the rural counties are by far the biggest barrier. They're hard to canvass, they're hard to reach, but it takes people in those communities. So I did a training, we do trainings every month across the country. And we got a lot of folks in states where there isn't a voter ID requirement who are very concerned about what's going on in states like North Carolina. I would say probably half my volunteers at every one of those trainings are from California, Washington State, and New York, because they're concerned and they want to do something. And the good news is, one of those weird silver linings of COVID was we learned how to actually help people get state IDs and driver's licenses remotely. We don't have to be sitting across the table. I like that work face-to-face, but we can do most of that remotely. And so we're training these volunteers, and what's great about that work that they do is we do have people who are in our focus states where we're doing this work, and they know organizations in their communities. Because I had at least 5 of the questions last night were, I live in such and such a county. If you're not working here, can I introduce you to organizations that you could then partner with, which will help you reach people in the community? Lots of times it's churches or really community-focused organizations. And that's how we get the work done, is through these myriad partnerships across the states.
Thank you so much for making that point, and that is the point where we have so many community leaders here in this audience, and we can support and they can support us in so many ways. And we have to make this a statewide collaboration in order for us to take this. They have won. We have to fight back hard and statewide like they did in states like Georgia. We can do this, and it is up to us. The people who came here tonight, it's up to us because you are motivated to be here. So you'll be able to motivate others. Thank you for that. Rutrina, you mentioned briefly about the possible ability for other people to come in and challenge another voter's legitimacy in the future. Poll watchers or something. Can you speak on what that is and how it can impact voters at the polls?
I know we have our, that could be the House Bill 772, which is, has a lot to do about poll observers. I'm gonna get to it. And I can explain a little bit about that. So mainly the House Bill 772 will make it easier for local party leaders to select partisan observers and have them move about more openly inside polling places. The bill is a top priority for the North Carolina Election Integrity Team. The big lie fueled conspiracy theories are just, and the language is pulled directly from that. The House Bill 772 is taken straight from the anti-voter extremist playbook, and is voter intimidation, allowing partisan observers to hoover around the area where people complete their ballots. HB 772 creates an unnerving and intimidating environment, which could add to fear and anxiety, especially for our BIPOC communities and in our rural areas. HB 772 makes polling places workable, where it would be 3 observers per party moving freely around voting enclosures, a total of 6 or 9, including libertarians, or even more with additional political parties. So if you can imagine even 6 people roaming around the polling place, that's more than anyone could monitor, right, while you're trying to vote. Any observer could demand to make an image of a completed authorization to vote form at any time. This means they could constantly intervene after every voter and demand to make a copy of the ADV, creating delays and unmanageable chaos at check-in desks. Moreover, any observer can speak to any poll worker at any time to answer any questions. This has not passed yet, y'all, so I do want to say that. It could be some amendments in this as well. And I believe when it went to the, as far as the 747, I believe there were some changes in this. Here it is, the new version of the House Bill 772, some of the language that they wanted to change about poll observers which would be much less dangerous than the original proposal that I just mentioned. It is sections involving criminal charges and extreme rights of poll observers. That has been removed. The version also removes provision allowing poll observers to roam freely. So that has been in polling places and curbside voting area, but it still allowed numerous observers to be in the polling place at any time. So that's what's going on with that. But it has not passed the chambers yet, so there's still work to be done.
So a question for everybody real quick before we take some questions from online and the participants here. What can voters do now to impact the passage of these bills in the future? And what kind of effect do you think this is going to have on turnout in the future? So in the immediate future and in 2024, and what can we do about that?
I'll definitely say get involved. I know anytime that we see these bills coming down, we do rapid response, right? We're sending emails, we're asking folks to reach out to their state legislators, we're asking folks to get their friends and their families to do it, we're asking folks to schedule meetings with them, personal meetings in the district or at their office, because you can. I think some people do not know that, but you can, because they work for you. Also, so those are some of the things. We're making calls as well when we see that something's not right. So I say get as many people involved as possible. We couldn't do this either without our coalition partners. I think we here in Mecklenburg are lucky to have such a great County Board of Elections director. He's always available, always around. So I say definitely, Mike, I don't want too many people calling you, but give him a call. He's around, always available. So that's definitely some of what we have been doing and educating as many people as possible. I think what Kate mentioned, messaging, who you're talking to at that moment is so important. I don't even know if I got off the question, Samantha. But yes, all of that is important in working together. That is key. Because I couldn't do this work common cause. None of us could do this work without each other. It all connects.
Absolutely. Get involved is key, and FYI, if you go to youcanvote.org/training, there are several options to get trained on how we talk about getting registered, how we talk about photo ID and what to bring, so that you can confidently go educate someone and know how to point to resources. And once you get trained, then you can come get involved with us. We've got Brandon Rivers here, our regional director here based in Charlotte. We have an office here in Charlotte. We need volunteers. Like I said, we have to talk to everyone. People don't know what's going on, and we need to get them to the polls. And what we really need to do for the long term is to increase voter turnout in every single election in which there is a choice to be made. And this involves education, education, education. And we need y'all to be part of the education crew in helping people learn about, understand, and be empowered to then actually go and vote. And we do this one conversation at a time. We come to churches, we come to festivals, we go to schools, we go to college campuses, you name it. We are out and about talking to people, listening, and combating their misconceptions and preconceived notions about voting, managing that because there's often a lot to untangle, and then providing the trusted, fact-based voting information for what's next. We want to get folks voting right away after they turn 18, as soon as they're eligible. We know if we get someone to vote 3 times in a row right after eligibility, they are a voter for life. So there's a critical time between 18, 17, pre-registration, 18, and 24. I want all North Carolinians to vote 4 times, but 4 times by the time they turn 24, because that's cementing voting in their life. They'll get a Senate race, they get presidential campaigns, they'll get local elections. You've got plenty of options to get those 3 votes in, 4 votes in before you turn 24. So it all matters, every single election matters, and we can't forget that after the 2024 election, there's an election in 2025. We can't all sleep for 4 years and pretend we only vote and get involved and volunteer right before a presidential election. Because that really does harm to the continuity of voters' experience and salience of all these elections.
I forgot the question. I answered it.
Mike, do you think that?
I do want to say one thing, so maybe two things. So number one, I talked about those free voter IDs that Michael's office are producing for people. My understanding is you're only supposed to get one if you don't already have a state ID or driver's license. If you have one, don't go clog up Michael's office requesting one of those documents because number one, you don't need it, and number two, his office has limited resources. He's got one printer right now and he's looking for a second. So we don't want to send everybody there and tell them, just go get that just in case. We have those intelligent conversations that Kate's talking about to make sure that people know what the rules are, what's accepted, and when they get close to an election, if they don't have something, that's a great place to go to make sure it's covered. And if they don't get that, they can vote the ID exception form. So for right now, we are in really good shape in North Carolina, except for all the confusion. And the confusion is actually the worst enemy of everything here. Because the more confused people are, the less likely they are to show up. They're going to be worried that they get in trouble. Like Kate said, they're going to be embarrassed. They don't want to have that happen. And so it's about meeting people where they are. If you listen to the folks in Ohio talk about what was the key to success in that election on issue 1, it was people taking the initiative to go speak to their friends and neighbors and have conversations that they had never had before because it was too important to not have a conversation. And I'm talking about stuff that isn't even the Vote Writers' mission because we're just focused on making sure people have IDs. But the work that's being done there, that kind of work where volunteers are teaching people how to talk to their neighbors, how to talk to their friends, and make sure that people know what's at stake and encourage them to take the issues up, to understand what's going on. That's what really makes the difference. I mean, it's not the economy stupid anymore, it's turnout. And that's what we need to do. So the Vote Writers work that we do, where we help people gather their underlying documents, we pay for their birth certificates, we provide free transportation to get them to the DMV and to Social Security offices, and if they're getting a driver's license, which is the only thing that costs money right now, then we pay for the driver's license fee as well. Providing that sort of wraparound service, making sure people know that we've got their backs and that we're going to make sure they get through what can be a really complicated process. That's the little niche that we have that fits us into the part of the puzzle that we're trying to solve.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you very much. The whole thing she said about the ID, if you've already got one, you don't need to come see me. I appreciate that. And let me clarify one thing. I think Kate said something about voting 4 times in 2024. Oh, yeah. We don't let you vote it but once each election. I just want to make sure if anybody's out there, I didn't hear it. And as long as you've got a retreat on board, you're going to make sure that the General Assembly is going to be, we're going to know about it. So I appreciate all 3 of these. And we are very fortunate. I live in Mecklenburg County. I work for Mecklenburg County. Mecklenburg County's resources are generous to this office. And anytime I go ask any of the county commissioners, what do you need? What did you need, Michael? Have you got enough to do your job? They want to protect your right to vote as much as we do here. So we're all very lucky in this county. Stay on top of things. Kate's got it there, and everybody up here on this table has the. It's very confusing right now. But do I need an ID? It doesn't have. Can I get it? It's very confusing, and that's for us to follow it. Imagine what it's like to the casual voter. It's going to walk out and say, "What do I need? Is that really what I want to do?" So we'll try to make it as seamless as possible for the voter when they walk into our voting process by opening up early voting, absentee by mail or election day, so that the problem isn't, well, gosh, Dickerson was giving me some obstruction to getting to vote. That's not going to happen from our office. So,
Okay, so we have a question about ID from the YouTube audience. Will you need your voter ID to be an exact match to your registration? I know personally, I had 5 different names on my voter ID because I was married in a different country.
right, let me say, what we're looking for is reasonable resemblance. Does that picture on that ID look like you? If there's a variation to the name, no, I can't, I'm not doing it. I'm not gonna say, okay, now give me your driver's license number, or what's your date of birth. I don't do that. I'm just looking for a reasonable resemblance to that picture. Yeah, you don't get any better than this on my picture. And my photograph 8 years old. That was the best it could be. Yeah, I had a full head of hair when I first got down here 25 years ago. Not anymore. No, we're not particular. I just want to see a reasonable resemblance. And if I am a judge and I say, yeah, that's not Rotrina. No, I remember a blue streak in that. No, that's not Rotrina. Then I called the other 2 judges over, the chief judge and the other judge, and they were, no, that is Rotrina. That's it, it's good enough. That's good enough for us. All 3 would have to unanimously decide, now this doesn't look like you, and then we're still going to give you a ballot to vote, but it'll be a challenge process through the ID exception. So, should be good. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Does anybody out there have any questions?
How y'all doing today? I just had like 3 quick ones, so forgive me, everybody. My first one is for, I believe your name, Michael?
Yes.
How you doing, sir?
Great.
My first question is, as far as the reason, well, nah, actually, you actually just answered that. I'll take it back. You actually just answered that. Thank you. About as far as the resemblance, so I apologize. Thank you. Miss Pamela, Voter Riders. So I'm familiar with your organization. I got approached with a card from my auxiliary group while I was near the courthouse, and I just kind of wanted to, I guess, get a clarification. So I know that you guys cover, like you just stated, fees, and forgive me if you already stated it, but the person from the auxiliary group, they also stated that you all cover transportation as well.
We do.
You do? Okay, thank
We
you.
do. So
Okay.
we have a partnership with Uber, where they've helped us through most of this year so far provide free rides for people. So we've had partnerships similarly with Lyft before, but right now it's with Uber, and I actually really love the platform. It enables us to provide people with free rides to and from the Social Security offices if that's where they need to go, or the DMV if that's where they need to go. It gets a little complicated because sometimes people don't have phones, but we figured out ways to work through that. I have to say the DMV staff are really great about calling the number on the card that they've been given, so that when the person's done at the DMV, we get a call saying, hey, Kate's ready, she's finished her transaction, can you send the Uber to bring her back, so that we don't have people stranded where we took them.
Thank you. And segue into it, my last one is for Miss Kate. So I know you stated that, which is I did not know, so thank you for that information, by the way. I know you stated that if you are a UNC student in the system, your actual school ID classifies as the ID. So I was just wondering about, so what about like if you were a student at like John C. Smith, I know it's a private institution, does that ID still cover?
Yes.
Thank you.
So there is a full list. There were 99 campuses and government institutions that got their IDs or their employer IDs approved for voter ID to use. And the full list is on our website. It redirects to the state board website, so you can look up each individual ID to see if it does work. But the good news is all of the UNC system school IDs work. Johnson C. Smith got in on time. All the HBCUs got in on time. There is another period, there will be another application period to get your IDs approved, like CPCC. Their student ID hasn't been approved yet, but they've got another chance before next year. They'll have another chance for the primary, another chance for the general to get their photo ID in compliance. But we know a lot of students at community college are commuter students, so they typically have some other form of ID, and if not, exception form. So.
Thank you all.
Somebody had their hand raised back there before you, Vivian. Did you have your hand up, John?
No, ladies first.
This is for Ratrina. So the poll observers, you said something about it being Republicans going in to observe, and that this HB 772, and that's going to allow for partisan observers in the polling place. That's not just limited to one party or another party.
No.
But it could get really messy if we had independents, Republicans, Democrats. And also, is that constitutional? I frankly feel a little threatened by that, so.
It's not law yet, so.
No, it's not.
Yeah, but.
Yeah, it's not, yes, it's not law yet. It may even be some more, like some amendments to that as well. But we are doing a rapid response on that to reach out to those. I can't even think who sponsored the bill right now, but definitely reaching out to those who sponsored the bill. And I can send this information. Everything that I talked about, we have information. As it changes, we'll update it so you know exactly what's going on and how it's moving through the House, and also once it hits the Senate and how it's moving there. And also how you can get involved to make sure we're reaching out and also expressing your thoughts and feelings on this, because it is something that's really serious.
Could I add something real quick to what Trina's saying? She's right that it is being, I'm sorry, thanks. It's being talked about changing it a lot, but we currently have observers. There are political appointed observers in any precinct that they decide to appoint to. Here in Mecklenburg County, I don't mind it. I think we get 2 from each party, and it's always been a Democrat or a Republican that get appointed. And now currently, okay, you sit in a chair right over here and you observe. You don't talk, you don't do anything else. You don't go up to a voter. The minute I see, and even in 772 that they're talking about, you cannot talk to a voter. I see you talking to a voter, I'm throwing you out. That's not your job. Your job is not to talk to voters. Your job is to observe and take notes. And if you have a question, you talk to the chief judge or the site coordinator. And that's the person you channel through. You have a problem with something we're doing, write a note, and we'll get there. Don't take a picture of anything. That camera is not allowed to be out of your pocket. So we do have that now, and for the most part, both parties really respect that here in this county. I've actually had both sides come up and say, one was so funny, she came up after a presidential election and said, my God, I've got a bone to pick with you. And it was a Republican Party. I said, oh my gosh, what that? Here comes a challenge. Protest election or something like, says you put all of my observers out of work. They all came back and said everything worked so smooth that all of your precincts, so all these precincts that these folks man, it worked so well that they did not feel like they had anything to do except for just sitting there all day. So thank you for the work. So I'd like sort of the affirmation on that.
But this HB 772 is different.
Yes, as Trina's an expert on it, it's going to add a lot more to it, and that's what she's concerned about. And me. But I don't know. I can't.
Thank you all so much. It's 8 o'clock, and we know what we're up against. They're not playing games. They're trying to take our voting rights away, and they're trying to oppress and suppress the vote. So what we have to do is collaborate, and collaborate stronger and harder than we ever did before. We didn't get it done. We got to work harder. I want to thank the panel. Thank you all for coming out. You're all wonderful, and I look forward We all look forward to working with you in the next years. Early voting for primaries begins here in Mecklenburg County on August 24th. In many cases, because of the limited voting we have here, the primary is basically the election. So please make it to the primaries, and then we'll have a general election, the local election, including the school board, on November 7th. So thank you for coming. Please carry all this information with you and share it. Thank you.